So yeah, thank you so much for being here. Prince Edward Learning Center is really happy to be partnering with Thrive to bring a couple of leaning into learn sessions around community wealth building. It's been a focus of how do we create inclusive communities, and what are other communities doing? Can we learn from others? So it's been really, really great. We started off with Community Land Trust. I'm really excited to hear from community builders on social enterprise and housing and everything there. Prince Edward Learning Center is an adult education center. We provide programming around literacy and essential skills, and that supports apprenticeships, people getting their high school credits, encourages people going back to college, working with people on independent pathways. We also run a youth employment and training program, as well as we have a financial empowerment program that supports people to navigate complex systems, but also access tax filings. We also do youth engagement. So we're working in collaboration with a number of communities or partners on upping high school graduation rates. And we also have PE Fresh. So we provide a market where there's lots of learning that happens at that market, but also provides a service to be able to provide fresh fruit and vegetables at wholesale prices. So that's us a little bit in a nutshell, and I'll pass it over to my partner, Katie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. As she said, my name is Katie McIntyre, and I'm serving as the community activator for Thrive PEC. So Thrive has really come together as an alliance of all types of folks in the community, really kind of led by three partners, the County Community Futures and the County Foundation. But really, we are a whole group of, whether it's individuals, business owners, or interested residents who are passionate about putting together our collective effort and seeing what we can do for change and the future of Prince Edward County. So we're really working on building a process for collaboration that we can enhance our capacity to change what's happening in the county. So conversations like we're having today are a great step for us to really kind of learn more and see what we can do to kind of put that into motion. So thank you so much for everybody for joining us today. And I'll pass back to Dom to introduce our wonderful guest. And we look forward to continuing and kicking off more conversations like this.
That's great. Thank you very much, Katie McIntyre from Thrive PEC as the community activator. And thank you, Christine Durant from the Prince Edward Learning Center. As mentioned, my name is Dominique Jones, and I'm the executive director of the County Foundation, which is the local community foundation in Prince Edward County. And I'll be playing the role of host today. One, because I like to talk, which can be a dangerous thing. And two, because the County Foundation is a founding partner of Thrive PEC. And we like to work with the Learning Center because a lot of our interest and mandate functions seem to align quite well. So before I introduce our wonderful guest, Carly, I do want to complete a land acknowledgement. And I'd just like to acknowledge that many of us are zooming in today from the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. These peoples agreed to mutual sharing obligations and responsibilities as stewards of the land and water. We recognize that these are now our shared obligations, working in partnership with our current neighbors, the Mohawk Bay of Quinte peoples. So as mentioned, today we are leaning in and learning about community builders with Carly Gasparini. So I would love to introduce Carly. She is the managing director of Community Builders and is based out of Sudbury, Ontario. She's worked in social enterprise for almost a decade, and her passion is finding innovative solutions for affordable housing. And after stumbling into the work of construction training, found a space where moving people out of poverty through employment and dignified housing collided. She believes strongly in a sustainable nonprofit sector that harnesses the business practices that work for the private sector with the passion and dedication that has defined the nonprofit sector for decades to solve our most complex social problems. So I'm very excited, Carly, to have you here today to tell us more about Community Builders and your experience. So if you'd like to get started, I guess the first thing that I want to know is how did you get started in Community Builders specifically? And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that organization to start.
Sure. So maybe I'll take one step back. So I'm always appreciative when land acknowledgements are made before a meeting starting. But I like to acknowledge for me what that means to acknowledge the land that we're on, because so often it's easy to say the words and we've built that into our processes, and that's a good thing. But also it's important to know what, particularly as settlers, what does that mean to acknowledge the land that we're on? And I've done a lot of journeying around being a settler and what does it mean to be a good ally, and what does this work mean in terms of Indigenous teachings and how Indigenous culture uses and treats the land and treats the people that inhabit the land. And so a lot of the work that I'm doing is based out of that work. And so just that's a piece of the land acknowledgement for me, is also acknowledging that I do this work out of the same respect that I would do, or the reason I acknowledge the land is because I do this work out of respect for the land that we sit on. And so I take that with me where I go. And I think that's an important second step that I like to acknowledge. And so for me, my journey began when I did an undergrad in sociology and a master's of public service. I knew I wanted to do community development work. I loved that work. I'd watched my mom run a small nonprofit here doing community development work. And honestly, I thought I would do it at the municipal government level in a cushy government job and be good. And that's where I started my career here in Sudbury, working for the city of Greater Sudbury as a policy advisor, and got to do some cool things. And then my husband took us to Manitoba for 7 years, and I had to give up my cushy government job and went into the private sector, or into the nonprofit sector, sorry. And because it wasn't an option there. And I found this organization that was called the Brandon Neighborhood Renewal Corporation. They were a small, actually not terribly small, but a community development agency. We did everything from community gardens, and probably much like many of the organizations you run have this kind of broad mandate to do good work in their community. We did like community gardens and murals. We also delivered all of the Reaching Home dollars, the homelessness dollars that the federal government gives out. We delivered those for all of Manitoba outside of Winnipeg. We did a whole bunch of different things. And when I was applying for the position, and they also had this construction company. And I remember being like, so community development, I know, downtown revitalization, that was kind of like, that was the core area. And I was like, yeah, I know these things. Construction, not really good with construction, but what do you need me to do? And they were like, don't worry, we have someone who knows about construction. We just need you to do the overall management. I was like, oh, no problem. So I kind of accidentally stumbled into this position where all of a sudden I was at the head of this construction company, but it wasn't just a regular construction company. It was a social enterprise. And I got introduced to this concept of social enterprise. And honestly, it was a gift. It was a gift that I didn't know the concept. I didn't know the world that it was, but it was a gift from the perspective of someone who watched my mom kind of struggle in that world of the nonprofit sector. Always chasing money, as you all know well, always having to be everything for everyone, being asked to work more with less all the time. And all of a sudden we had this revenue generator that was doing good work, that still very much met our mission. And I'll talk all about that in a minute, but very much met our mission, but also brought in real dollars into our organization that were not restricted, that had nobody got to tell me how I could spend them except for me. I got to decide what we did with them, and my team got to be creative and innovative on how we solved the complex issues that came up in our communities. We had this money that was ours, and it was like a light bulb went off in my brain. And for me, it awoke in me this entrepreneurial spirit that I probably did have, but hadn't been listening to for most of my life, and didn't know apply to community development work. And that's the work I wanted to do. But all of a sudden now I could be this entrepreneur and have these innovative conversations around good business practices and learn about good business practices and apply those to bring in more money. And I started having lots of conversations with other nonprofits around, what does it mean to be a nonprofit? And so many nonprofits say, well, you can't make money, which is so no, that is not true at all. You can make all the money. We always like to say, none of us gets a jet ski, but we can make all the money, which means we can't have stakeholders who get money for doing nothing. It doesn't mean I can't get paid a wage that allows me to live a comfortable life, but I don't get the jet ski, you're not Jeff Bezos coming out of this, but you can pay your staff, you can hire good professionals, you can make money. But you reinvest that into your communities. There's no, you still have a nonprofit board, you still have, there's still criteria there that makes you a nonprofit, but you can make all the money. And in fact, I encourage you to make all the money, because once I got sitting in a position where I had this organization that was now bringing in their own revenue, I had the power, because money is power. I had the power to create programs in our community that we never would have been able to do if I had to wait for some consultant in some government office to decide that that's what they were going to have a funding program for, and that I could apply and I could get exactly what I needed and fund it to the full amount and all the rest of the struggles. And for me, it was like when you're filling out an application for funding and they ask, like, how is your project going to be sustainable? And like, you mean after you stop giving me this money? Well, I'm either going to get money from somebody else, or I'm not going to do the project anymore. Like, that's always been the answer, right? But now it's like, no, I'm going to make my own money and I'm going to pay for it like that, and so it just opened up this wide world of what can we do. And then I started to learn about, okay, so what types of social enterprise, and in my world, it was a construction social enterprise. And I can tell you, I still don't really know much about construction, and I've been doing it for a really long time. I'm still really terrible with a drill. I try really hard, but I'm very bad with a drill. But that doesn't matter, because you start to look at one of the pieces that the nonprofit sector struggles with is that because we don't always have the funds, we don't always attract the right professionals for the job. And so I stepped in as ED, and I had a master's degree. I wasn't, I didn't know nothing. I was pretty intelligent, but all of a sudden I was head of IT. Well, I'm certainly not an expert in IT, and head of finance, and like, my math skills weren't great, and head of HR, and like, that was a huge learning curve. And I wasn't, if you were looking for a head of any of those departments, I am not the person you would have hired for any of those things. But in the world of nonprofits, you don't get to hire those professionals. You get to hire one person who has to be it all, right? And the world of social enterprise demands that we start to look at the professionals who are trained to do those jobs, which means we then start to ask those professionals to shift into that mindset of nonprofits, where you work too hard and don't get paid as much, and or you have you make exceptions, or all of those that dedicated and loving and good-hearted work that comes out of the nonprofit sector. And you've got to blend these two things in a way that is messy. It's messy almost every day, even when you have people who love it. It's messy because they weren't designed to blend like that. So then let me tell you how I got here to Community Builders, and let me talk about Community Builders before I get to, I tend to get off track, but let me get to Community Builders. So I was working in Brandon, and I did love it working for BNRC. We did some really cool work. With that, I learned a lot. We were in the world of construction. We were also in the world of bedrug remediation. Was a world of social enterprise we did. There was also social enterprises that I got to work with that did like mattress recycling and youth programming, where they were building like smaller woodworking projects, like not big construction, but breadboards and sewing, different sewing things. There's social enterprises that do catering. So I got exposed to all of these pieces where really anything can be a social enterprise if you can find that social piece, that piece that's going to have the greater good for your community. And so I'm exposed to it, and I was loving it, but my heart was in Sudbury. My parents are here, my sister's here, all our kids are here. I really wanted to get home to Sudbury, and particularly in COVID, I had to spend Christmas, whatever it was, 2020 or 2021, alone at home, and cried all day long. Very sad to not be home, as everybody did. I thought, no, I'm done. I'm going home. And it was like, when you put something out into the universe and something comes back, and Community Builders came back. And so I had met Brandon, who's our CEO and my partner, my business partner in this. So I had met him at a conference for the work at some years earlier, and I knew he was doing good, cool work in Brandon, in Barrie. Sorry, I was living in Brandon, and his name is Brandon. So sometimes I mix those up in my brain. He was in Barrie. He was doing some cool work, and Brandon was raised in a construction family here in Sudbury. His family owns a fairly large construction company. He had moved to Barrie with his wife and started, still wanted to work in construction, but started a smaller construction company, a for-profit contracting company, just small. And he was doing work for Habitat and other volunteer opportunities, even globally, like internationally, he was doing it and really getting a lot of satisfaction out of that volunteer work. And thought, man, I wish I could do this, for a living. Like I could somehow blend these two things. And he learned about the world of social enterprise. And so he took his for-profit company and turned it into a nonprofit, just reincorporated it as a nonprofit, and created Community Builders. And that is a very unique kind of origin story for a social enterprise. In right now, there are 11 social enterprises that do construction training that are connected. There may be others, out there that just are not connected the way that we're connected, like, just not connected via like an informal network. But of the 11 of us, all the rest of us, except for Community Builders, started as a community agency, just as BNRC was, who wanted to do some work in employment, knew that employment was, if housing is first, employment is second, or maybe third next to addiction and mental health supports, and then employment is third kind of thing. Knew that employment was part of the solution to ending poverty and ending homelessness in our communities. And so found employment solutions through social enterprise. Most of the origin stories start like that, which I'm guessing is kind of what it's going to look like in Prince Edward County, based on who's sitting at this table, where community groups are coming together to do this work. Community Builders started the other way, in that we started with the construction, and that's an important difference, because what we've learned is you really do need, because that meshing, like I said earlier, was very messy, where you're trying to train construction workers to be more social, and you're trying to train all the social workers in, like, not official terms, but all of us who work in the nonprofit sector to think like business people. And now you're meshing them together, and neither of them are comfortable in the other person's zone. And there's a little bit of conflict too in the world of like people versus profits. That there's inherent conflict in that. And so it's messy anyway. But so no matter where you start, it's going to cause some conflict. But because Community Builders started as a construction company first, it was a lot different, and it gave us a lot of learnings around the importance of having good. And I just saw in the chat come up that Barrie is a construction partner. It sounds like building 17 new homes. So it's so important to have the construction partners at the table, to have that knowledge. You can't train people in construction if you don't have skilled people. And just to be clear, your social enterprise does not need to be construction. Because my passion is affordable housing, the world of construction makes a whole lot of sense. But like I said earlier, there's social enterprises who do a wide range of things that might work better for different community agencies. But if you have a construction partner at the table who is an expert in these things, that's a very vital partner to move this forward. And I think Community Builders is a really good example of how that it can work from the other side and be successful from the other side. But really, you need the meshing of the two. So that happened about 6 years ago, that Brandon turned his private company into a social enterprise, and they started training individuals. So he had his regular crew of people who were working on, they did everything from like executive custom builds to renovations to they do a lot of secondary suites, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But they had their regular construction crews, and then they started using Employment Ontario offices who were offering wage subsidies that exist in any communities to fund the trainee positions. until we managed to secure some kind of longer term funding, which we now have from the federal government, secured longer term funding to cover those wages. Because of course you can't pass on those trainee wages to your clients because your prices will be way out of market. You have to keep your prices at market. And that's an important piece. We are a market construction company. You're not going to get, you don't pay less to hire us. But you also don't pay more. That's an important piece of it. But so there are costs then to training individuals that we need covered. And so we cover those with funding. But any of our skilled laborers, we cover ourselves with the revenue that we bring in from the job itself, because that's how a construction company would normally work. And that piece of it works the same way as a regular construction company. And so to cover the wages for their trainees, they were using the employment center's wage subsidies, and it was working. It just limits how long you can keep a person on for, because those wage subsidies will be limited. And then as we grew, we were able to secure funding. And so about a year, so they've been in existence for about 6 years doing that. And then about a year and a half ago was when Sudbury came onto the map. And how that happened, really the catalyst for that was that an organization called Raising the Roof, which I'm sure most of you know of, with the toques. Last Tuesday was Toque Tuesday. Go buy a toque, support Raising the Roof. I always put the plug in because they're an important partner of ours. So Raising the Roof, about 5 or 6 years ago, changed up their model a little bit and kind of refocus their programming into the Reside program. And what Reside does is they hired the right professionals. And again, that's an important piece of this, is hiring the right people, not faking it till you making it, but actually looking for the right professionals and compensating them appropriately. They hired some really smart development professionals who go across the country and find vacant and underused buildings in communities across Canada. And then they exclusively use social enterprise companies, training companies, construction companies to do the work on these properties to fix them up. And then they use a nonprofit housing provider to deliver them as affordable forever. So here in Sudbury, Sudbury Housing, who's our housing corporation here, has been selling off some of their single family homes out of their stock. I haven't had a chance to look at your homeless demographics, but I'm going to guess, like the rest of the country, what you are actually needing right now for housing is single bedroom, 1-bedroom units. And there's a good reason for that. And maybe it's different in Prince Edward County, but like I said, I didn't go look at your stats, but in many places across the country, we have traditionally, as a country, we have invested in seniors housing, we have invested in youth housing, we have invested in family and women's housing. And not to say that any of those areas have adequate units of housing, we don't, but it has never been politically pleasing or politically palatable to invest in housing for single men. There's really been very little 1-bedroom units built outside of the social housing, and even then we are lacking severely in 1-bedroom units. That is what most people need is 1-bedroom units. So here in Sudbury, that is definitely true about our demographics. Our wait list for 1-bedroom housing is like 7 years long for 1-bedroom units on our social housing list. And so Sudbury Housing is selling off some of their 3-bedroom single family homes, of which they have no wait list for. And those houses are expensive to maintain, and they're scattered site, all of the rest of it. And so they are selling them off. Most of them went to the private sector, which is of course heartbreaking to those of us in the world of housing who we know that's being lost. Here in Sudbury, Raising the Roof, of the first 35 that were sold, Raising the Roof purchased 5 of them, and have hired community builders to renovate the main floor 3-bedroom units and add a legal secondary suite to each of the basement units, so that they equal 2 units of housing. So we lost 35, but we saved 10 or created 10 units. So the burden of our loss to our social housing or our affordable housing stock is less. When that deal was starting to happen, Raising the Roof knew if they were going to buy these houses, they needed a social enterprise. And so went to Brandon, who they knew had some connections in Sudbury, and so said, you know, would you consider expanding into Sudbury? He called me and said, you know anybody who would want to do this work in Sudbury? I was COVID lonely and ready to come home, and said, I do know someone who wants to do this work in Sudbury, and, you know, forced my family to move across the country again with me, and came back. Since moving back, we have here in Sudbury, we have found a space, which is another huge hurdle when starting a social enterprise construction company, because you need a shop, which is expensive and a big expense. You need a shop somewhere that has some offices, even if they're crammed and shared, which ours are. But you need to focus on an area where you can do construction, and you have a classroom for people to learn in. Those are really vital. And so we secured that. We have to build your crew. And so again, that's finding the right skilled professionals in the world of construction. And I say the right ones because you have to make sure they understand the mission. I say this all the time to my foreman. I go out and I make promises to the community. I make promises to community agencies. I make promises to funders. I make promises to trainees, like future and potential clients. I make promises about what we're going to offer, and then I bring them all back here, and then I push them out and put them on crews with my foreman, and it's up to them to fulfill all the promises that I have made. So that's a huge responsibility that I have, to make sure that I don't overpromise, and that I'm supporting the crews that I have to be able to do that. But it means you have to find the right people to be on your crew who are going to get it, who want to. At Community Builders, we have kind of 3 values that we talk about our culture. Our culture kind of needs to have, and values that we ask staff to come with, and that is, we ask people to come healthy, and not just healthy in terms of their own physical health. We don't expect anyone to go to the gym or anything like that, but healthy in terms of, you know, wanting a good work-life balance, wanting to take care of people, caring that they what they say matters, that we're creating a safe space, a healthy space for others. We're treating people in a way that is, you know, healthy. And so a lot of people that come through our program, for instance, are coming through recovery. We can't be talking about how big a party we're going to have on the weekend, right? That is in a healthy environment for them. So you have to be committed to that healthy environment. We ask that people come hungry. And again, that's not that you need to skip lunch. It's that you're hungry for our mission. That you want to be part of building affordable housing units, that you want to be part of training people and moving them into the private sector, that you want to go the extra mile for people and for yourself. And we ask that people come humble. And that's a really important one, because even if you are the foreman on the site and you have all the construction knowledge, the individual coming into the program has very different lived experience from you, and there is knowledge in that lived experience, and that humble, that willingness to be teachable in all aspects of your life is an important part of what we're doing here. Learning from other people's struggle, from other people's journey, from other people's lived knowledge is really, really important. And so those humble, hungry, and healthy, we ask people to come with those and maintain those on a regular basis. Be reminded of what we're doing here, which do not define the construction sector. I will tell you, they do not. They in fact contradict the construction sector in many cases. And so it is about shifting people, because you don't want to set them up and treat them a certain way, and they think that, oh, it's all about, this world where we treat each other so well, and then you get put in a place and you get called an idiot for the first time, and you think, but also you can hold people accountable to starting to change that culture, and because we've seen that happen on not all construction sites, but certainly on construction sites, we've seen that where people get treated poorly. And so holding that construction sector, I always say we're holding the construction sector accountable to being better, and we're holding the nonprofit sector to being better by taking the best pieces of both of those sectors and combining them. And so that's an important piece for us. there was another piece I wanted to go. I'm not quite remembering. I'm going to just take a minute. I'm going to stop. I'm going to try and share my screen and share a video. Sorry.
The overall goal for our training program is really to get people to a place of employment. What we offer in this 16-week paid program is the opportunity to do all the various types of construction skill in more of a residential setting, working through demolition, framing, insulation, drywall, theory on electrical, plumbing, mechanical, really going through the different trades all the way through a full build.
Community Builders is that training ground where they can make mistakes and they can learn from those mistakes, and we're going to be supportive, and we're always looking to set people up for success in training those skills, but also in trying to remove some of those barriers where we can.
You know, help them budget their money. We have social programming, we have mental health programs, just to get them out of the system.
We're working with them the whole time to kind of focus on their goals and which particular trade they might want to go. And that's what we do. We're getting people ready for work, giving them all the tools so that they can be employment ready and not only get a job, but keep a job.
Yes.
So
yes,
that's those images that you were just seeing, those were images of the houses we were doing here in Sudbury. The last thing I really want to talk about around construction, I think I'm still playing. Hold on. Okay. Sorry about that. I kept playing YouTube in the background. So one of the pieces that all of the social enterprises that are doing construction, those 11 that I'm talking about, all of them rely and reside through Raising the Roof is kind of a new developer and a new way that is helping us be successful here. But the other piece that makes us successful here in Sudbury, but also across the 11 organizations that are doing this, is something called social procurement. It's an important piece of the puzzle in that social procurement is any of our public agencies, typically our municipal and provincial governments, specifically in our cases, social housing agencies, but it could be anything. They are already contracting out a considerable amount of services. So in the world of social housing, there's a ton of construction that gets contracted out, a lot of repairs, maintenance programs, capital projects, all of that already gets contracted out. They are already procuring those services. And so social procurement services just means that they are doing so for companies that have social outcomes. And so Manitoba was, I can speak to Sudbury's version 2 because it is more relevant to what happens in Ontario, but just to give because I was in the Manitoba world for so long, Manitoba Housing runs all of the social housing. That work was never downloaded to social service agencies the way it was here in Ontario. And so Manitoba Housing delivers it all. We did BEEP was our program in Manitoba, the Brand and Energy Efficiency Program. Not that that's important, but BEEP did about $1.25 million worth of capital projects for them annually. That's the work I used to do the projects. I always say, if I don't have construction work to do, then I don't have any way to train people besides what can happen in the classroom or what they can already take at the college, or there's like a million programs where they can go and sit in class. What makes this different is that they are on a payroll, they are being paid real wages and CPP on their behalf and EI on their behalf, and they have all the rights and responsibilities of an employee, and we have all the rights and responsibility as an employer. And we're providing those responsibilities to them. So they're being paid and they are working on an actual job site, actual jobs. That is the biggest difference between many of the other programs and what we're doing here. That's how we are making money, because we are serving actual clients and doing actual jobs. None of this is makeshift work. And so the more work I have, the more people I can train. We try and keep our crews to have, we have a foreman, a lead, sometimes a general laborer, and then 2 trainees on a crew. Any more than that, and it's quite frankly overwhelming on a crew, on any site, because they need one-on-one attention. So the foreman can kind of go with one, the lead hand can go with the other, and then you have a general laborer who can do some of the stuff that you just need someone a bit more competent to do. but that's kind of your max. So if I only have one crew, the most I can train is 2 people. If I have 3 crews, which is what I currently run here in Sudbury, I can train 6 people at a time. My goal is by the end of kind of maybe mid next year or end of summer next year to have 5 crews. So I can be training 10 people at a time. But in order to do that, I need the work, right? And so I need either through social procurement, the housing delivery agent, which here is Sudbury Housing, to be giving me enough work, which that's an important piece of the puzzle, because you're going to need them to commit to that, which of course means going through their procurement and legal folks at whatever municipal government or that level that you're at, or whatever level of government you're at. But to set, they are legally allowed to carve off work for a nonprofit. That is in the legislation that governs the procurement for now. You're going to want to check all those locally and what happens locally and how they're interpreting it. But that's an important piece, is social procurement and getting your government levels on board and having them use social procurement. And there are places like Winnipeg and Ottawa who have actually just gone through a process where they have not just shifted their one department to be using social enterprise, which is what happened in the province of Manitoba. They put a really solid social procurement policy into Manitoba housing because it was like they could get away with it politically without ruffling too many feathers in the private sector. And so they did that. But places like Winnipeg and Ottawa have actually just shifted their entire procurement policy, everything they procure, to a social procurement policy. And so everything that they do, and I don't know the ins and outs of their individual policies, but everything they do is weighted on social benefits, environmental benefits, social outcomes for people, all sorts of different things. And they are weighted in that way. And so these are things we need to advocate for at our local government levels, to have social procurement policies in place so that they can give you work, whether it's in construction or whether you decide that your social enterprise is a cafe or a catering company and you're training people through the kitchen and through the hospitality field, or it's in recycling and it's a different employment piece, or there's all sorts of places that you can train people in employment. And social enterprise isn't, you're as Dominic said, a social enterprise kind of has 2 bottom lines. One is profit, which is important. The other is a social outcome. It doesn't have to be training individuals. It could be environmental. It could be all sorts of things, as long as it's for the greater good. I suppose there's a conversation about who gets to decide what the greater good is, but I mean, I suppose socialists, get to decide, like people doing the work are deciding, the same way that the nonprofit sector has been doing that all the way along, right? Deciding what the solutions need to be, so, or what the problems are, whatever it is. But that's the group who are deciding. But there's a second bottom line. So in the world of social procurement, governments are procuring a ton of services. Every single meeting that governments have are catered, or there's a cafe in their spaces, or those all need to be procured from the private sector. All of those could be procured using social procurement and done and delivered through social enterprise. And so in our world of construction, that's an important piece for us, was having social enterprise be at the core of them. And it's not easy. It's not easy to convince local governments to kind of move in that direction. It's hard because there's so much pressure from the private sector to not do that, obviously. And there's always that kind of that dilemma here in Sudbury. And I don't know what it looks like, what your trades look like and your workforce looks like, but here we have a massive workforce deficit in the world of trades, and labor deficit. I'm guessing it's the same there. So there's always this pull, because on one hand, they don't want to lose the work, but on the other hand, they so desperately need the people that we are connecting to the employment that they have, right? So that's how I sell it to employers that say, like, yeah, we need your work, because if I don't have work, I can't train people. But I'm going to produce really, really good employees for you on the other side, and then you can have them, and you can, you know, and then you have this. So that's always kind of the trade-off, but there's always this push and pull for sure. But social procurement's an important piece of that. And then the last piece, you know, raising the roof is a part of this, is that we are you know, in the world of construction and the world of community builders, we are advocates for affordable housing in a huge way, in that we work primarily in affordable housing. Barrie still does a little bit more in the private sector because of that initial roots that they had and that reputation they have, and you're not going to turn down work when you get it, if you get it. But here in Sudbury, you know, because we started from a little bit, like a little later and in a different way, we're really, so I get on, you know, behind any of the affordable housing projects. Sudbury was chosen as one of the communities, for instance, to get some of the rapid rehousing dollars in this 4th round that the federal government is putting out. I have a project that I think it should go to. I've been very vocal in advocating for that project. They have committed to letting us do a ton of the work if they get fully funded and are able to move forward with doing that project. And so any of those projects, so I know a couple of your organizations that are here today have a few. I mean, someone's building 17 homes. Well, if all of the cabinets in those homes could be put in by a social enterprise, they don't have to build the whole homes, but if they could do all of the cabinets, that's great work for training, or doing all the drywalling, because everybody knows you need more drywallers in every town. There's not enough good people who can mud and tape, and no one wants to do that job. And so if you can train up, you know, 3 really good mudders and tapers in your community, they'll find jobs. They, you know, if not, send them to Sudbury and I can get them a job if they're good at mudding and taping, that's for sure. So if you have, you know, particularly in the world of affordable housing, if you have work that's being done, you might not be the contractor who's doing the whole project, but if you can get them to carve off some of the work for you and use that as training, that's a great way. And again, you're charging rates, you're being subcontracted out to do that, and being paid to do that, but it's, you know, it's, and again, any of the extra costs that would come around the training, that there is not being covered by that subcontract fee. And you have to deliver a product that is as good as, you know, and is satisfactory to whoever is the general contractor or the project manager for the project and the client. You have to be delivering the product that they want and deserve. But you might have done it, you know, the timeline might be a little slower, but you're getting all the way along, you're getting people kind of on board so that they know what's happening here and they're ready for it. And those are conversations that you have to have before you get, you know, you really get started. You got to have some of that work lined up. You have to have people on board. This is a community effort, even right down to your supplier. We work with Home Depot here. They are very good to us. We get a discount. They often donate tools or materials to us for training purposes. You know, all sorts of things. In Manitoba, we had a smaller local company. I mean, it was a win for them because we just put everything that we did through them, so they made a lot of money off of us, but then they were very good to us. And having that supplier be a part of that community project and be a part of what you're doing is an important piece of it. And so what partners do you need? And for those of us in the nonprofit sector, these are partners that we don't traditionally think about when we're doing a project. We don't necessarily think about this is a different world of community partners that you're bringing in, and so it's broad but very doable. And the bonus is that you look around at your developers, you know, your big and small developers, a lot of them are making a lot of money. There's work and money in the world of construction. Why wouldn't you want, you know, your social enterprise to get your hands on it? There's risk involved too, of course, just like any other business. You have to be ready to take on risk for sure. But the reward is high if you are careful and you do it right and you do it well and you do make those relationships and you get the right people on, then you're moving in the right direction. So I think I'll stop and get some questions and see where we go, and then, you know, if there's other pieces I should elaborate on, then I'll go there.
Yeah, that sounds great, Carly. One quick question that I had just from my list here, and you've given a very fulsome overview. There's there's a lot involved in your day to day and community builders. So particularly, I think we all know that there is demand in the trade sector. We've all felt it anecdotally, and we hear it from our employers locally. Can you explain how people move through the training process with community builders, and maybe just, I don't know if you'd have any numbers available, how many people are going through the training process on an annual basis, and if you have any sort of success or impact percentages after the fact in terms of continued employment? I think that would be great.
Sure. So our program here, and they do vary. Like there's lots of different, like between the 11 of us that are delivering it, people have different models and what works for them. So, and often it depends on what funding you can get, honestly, and what what the funder is going to be willing to pay for. But here in Sudbury, we have a 14-week program. Well, I know Brandon said 16-week, but it has shifted since the video is made. But so it's a 14-week program. They spend the first 2 weeks in the classroom, the whole day, all day, every day. And we put them through a soft skills curriculum that they get a certificate at the end that says that they've gone through it. And it covers everything from like conflict resolution to budgeting to parenting to rights and responsibilities as an employee, to health and safety pieces, all sorts of things. We also do courses like your working at heights certificate. Depending on the availability, we sometimes do first aid in there. We always like to get first aid in, but it's not always possible. So we do like WMIS training. We do Ontario's 4 Steps to Safety. Some of the certificates that employers are going to be looking for. We do all of that in the classroom, and then we have an in-class construction trainer who introduces them to how to read a tape measure, how to, this is a drill and this is how it works and this is how, to do it safely. And now you're going to do it in the classroom and you're going to feel how that looks like. And we do small projects, dog bowls and, small coffee tables and that kind of stuff that we create in the classroom or in the shop at that time to get a good feel of the saws and the power tools. So they spend the first 4 weeks doing that. Then the following 12 weeks, they spend Mondays back in the classroom. And again, they finish a curriculum. There's both a construction curriculum and a soft skills curriculum that they go through that we have written. And then they spend, we work 4-day work weeks here as a company. We just found the 10-hour days. It's still 40 hours a week. We just work 10-hour days. And we find that by the time you get to site, you get set up and you get going, whatever else, the 10-hour day just allows for more productivity. And having the Friday off allows them, a lot of individuals, as they are removing barriers, have lots of meetings to go to or appointments to go to or whatnot. And so it allows them that day on Friday to be able to do that without having to take time off work or for us to have to schedule around. We are now working with our local school board who does adult education to upgrade math. So again, we'll work that into the calendar so they can upgrade their math or their English if they need to. We actually just got accredited so that our program will count as 5 credits towards their high school diploma. So if they need that, we can work through that with them. And then all the way through, they're working one-on-one with our training program coordinator who's identifying barriers that they individually might have. So that might mean they need ID. It might mean they need a bank account. It might mean they're working on housing, security concerns, transportation, childcare, all sorts of different pieces. They're working through their recovery. We kind of have two pieces that we ask. I don't like to call them barriers, but and I don't even like to call them requirements because we always make exceptions. But 2 pieces that we ask people to come to the table with. And that is a grade 10 understanding of math. And that's because fractions and angles are a huge part of construction, and we don't want to set people up for failure. And if you can't understand fractions and angles, then you're going to really struggle in construction, and it's not going to be for you. And the other thing is, if you are actively in an addiction, then you're going to struggle to come to work 4 days a week, 10-hour days. And so we ask that you be working with someone on your recovery. We will support that process, and we have supported that process. Many of our individuals' addictions recovery is part of their journey, and this is their first employment back or ever. But since their recovery has started, and so that's got to be a part of work, incorporating what that looks like, and so all of that happens, and they spend 3 days a week every week. So Mondays they're back in classrooms. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays they are on site with our crews, on site doing whatever jobs we have lined up for that week. We typically pair them up with a mentor, either a lead hand or a foreman, so that they're working side by side with someone and they have someone to ask questions. And we rotate them through sites to try and make sure that if this is all drywalling and this is all siding and this is all flooring, then they're getting a chance to kind of get access to all of those things. And there's a lot of balancing work that we have to do there, and working between our training coordinator and our construction manager to make sure that happens.
That's great. Thank you, Carly. Lots of wraparound features are offered with your training, which is very impressive. It's not just on the job skills. It's really helping people get to that point of personal and professional success. So that's very amenable. I'm going to open up to questions from those in the Zoom audience. So if you'd like to, just so that we can keep this relatively straightforward, we'll do a raise the hand feature on the Zoom, which you can find under reactions, and you can raise your hand that way. Or if you prefer, you can type it in the chat box, and I can read it out to Carly, or Carly can read it from the chat. So either or. I've got Zoom host was the first to raise hand, and is it Ken? Is that right? Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure that I recognize you. Ken, you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I often host the Zoom meeting, so I don't know how to change that. I'll have to get Barry. He's a whiz at technical things to show me how to fix that. Hello, nice to meet you in face-to-face, Carly. I really appreciate. Now, have you seen by chance the Jumpstart program in the United States in Baltimore, Maryland?
I did take a look when you sent me the link last week, so I'm not in full, but I've taken a look. Yeah, it is similar.
Yeah, because we were studying that until we heard about your situation or your plan, and it's great to be able to use a Canadian version of it. Now, the one in the States is like what, very, very similar to yours, except they're really not paid.
Yeah, so that's an important piece for us, is the paid work. It does mean you have to, I mean, a regular construction company can't afford to just pay people to learn and to make mistakes and not know what they're doing typically. And so that's an important piece of getting that covered. So whether that's through the Employment Ontario programs that cover wage subsidies, that's a great place to start, because they give you typically 12 to 14 weeks of their payment of their wages covered. So that's a great place to start. Or there are provincial and federal programs that'll long-term cover some of those wages. But that is an important part to us.
We have been utilizing that already, and we've probably put 5,000, at least 5,000 plus hours of training into the project, the Love Song project. So we've hired 6 the first 2 years ago, and last year 9 trainees through a program with a qualified carpenter's assistant. So it's really great that we found out about your plan, and we'll definitely consider implementing it into the. Now, it does their training count towards an apprenticeship? Because the one in the States is a pre-apprenticeship program, and they call it 3 strikes. That if they're late, that's a strike. If they are caught on their cell phone during the working day, that's a strike. If they're goofing around or come to work tired or exhausted and are not 100% active, that's a strike and they're out.
That is a much tougher program than ours.
Yeah. Well, they referred to it that somebody said, is this a handout or a hand up? He says, do not talk handout to me. I do not want to give a handout to anybody. This is a hand up, because a huge percentage of their program, Peter, well, they have a 90+% success rate of the students or the young people, young men and women. And a lot of them, as you said, have addiction problems or have been incarcerated for long periods of time. This is their hand up. They are jumping at the opportunity to get a skill training, and they have a 90% success rate of going from their program of Jumpstart into the training or the apprenticeship program market. We are a perfect model to apply your program. So we need one of your successful graduates to come down. I mean, we've got 35 classrooms. We've got blackboards. We've got instructors. We've got teachers and draftsmen and electricians and so forth that are retired that are saying, and I think Prince Edward County is super hurting, not only for housing, but also for tradespeople. You just can't get them. And they're not trained, a lot of them. And we have that.
Well, it sounds like you've got a lot of the pieces in place already. I think those numbers are not, I would say, I think we put on our applications for things that our success rate is 95. Now, we are not a pre-apprentice program because we don't commit to people moving into apprentice. We help anybody who wants to get into apprentice. We help them move in that direction. And working on our crew, those hours would count. They are working for a construction company, so they would count to start. But we would move anybody who wanted to. Many of our individuals aren't ready to move in that direction just yet, but could be once they are finished ours to kind of get into a pre-apprentice. And certainly we teaching those important employment skills like showing up on time and taking breaks only at break time, and behaving appropriately on site, not being on your cell phone, and certainly fit for duty and safety is of top priority for us. I don't know that we call it a 3-strike program. And in fact, we always say you can't really get fired from community builders. You can get asked to consider whether or not now is the right time for you to be taking on this type of employment, or whether this type of employment is right for you. And we can mutually decide that it's not and ask you to do some work before you come back to us. But of those who finish the program, we too have about a 95% rate of moving them into full-time employment or onto higher education to move in that direction. So a little bit different, but similar. I mean, I remember the program, one of the other kind of sister programs of those 11 in Winnipeg, Build, when they were, they were up and running for a while, but really kind of going to the next step. And they put out a call. They had 10 open spots and put out on social media that they had these spots and who they were looking for. And it was individuals who had barriers. That's what they were looking for. And their office was on a second floor of a building, this big building called the Social Enterprise Center in Winnipeg, which is really a cool space. They had people out the door of their office, down the 2 flights of stairs, out the door and around the building, looking for those 10 spots. This idea that people don't want to work or just they're lazy and they don't want to get a job, or that's baloney. That doesn't exist. People are jumping at the chance for this type of training. They want, and it's the barriers that exist. A number of our individuals will come to us, and bank accounts are so often one of the biggest barriers, that they don't have a bank account and they don't have the ID to get the bank account. And so we actually had someone come in our first group of 6 that started with us, and he was sharing his bank account with 6 people. It was like his ex and her cousin and some old buddy of his cousins, and I don't know who else. and they were sharing a bank account because that's how they were getting their ODSP checks. They needed a bank account for it to go into, and so they all gave the same bank account. And so we were putting his check, like when he started working for us, and then but then his housing was not, like his rent was not being paid, and we knew his housing. We were like, well, like we're giving, like you're getting paid, like just why aren't you paying your rent? And they're like, he's like, well, I'm not spending it, but like I can't control who takes my money. They're all taking it, and I'm like, this is like, most people don't even share their bank account with their husbands, you know, like there are many people who will not get joint bank accounts, and this person is like, you know, sharing their bank account with 6 people. But he had immigrated here when he was 3 and couldn't get his immigration. He had lost his Canadian citizenship card, and getting that back takes 18 months, and filling it out, and there's a fee, and there's a million reasons why you can't. And he didn't have the, you know, he had this like crinkled up little birth certificate from Ireland that was like, you know, if you blew on it the wrong way, it was going to turn to dust. That was like his only piece of ID that somehow he had managed to hold on to. And so, you know, like all of these pieces that you think like, oh, just go get a job. Well, you're like, you are 17 million pieces of paper away from just getting a job. And so we just start to work through that paperwork and those pieces. And I think the point, Dominic, that you raised around, you know, that really wraparound support, I always like to say that we are an unconditional supporter. So we don't like to duplicate support. We always look, if a person is, and there's a question in the chat around how do you identify and recruit candidates, and we do that through community partnerships in a huge way. So we're connected with the Friendship Center, we're connected with CAH here, we're connected with here in our community, we have a group called the ACT, the Acute Community Treatment Team, which is an addictions treatment team that we have here for addictions. And so we work with all of our community partners who, the Salvation Army, tons of people who fill in the application, and so if they are already working with that person, we continue to work with that service delivery with whoever they're already, with parole officers, we're on the phone with them all the time, with anybody who's already offering this person services. We don't want to duplicate it all, so we are going to work with them to make sure that whatever supports, you know, we had someone in one of our programs who was working with he was living in a program, living in the space, and he was coming every day without lunch. And so we just called and said, listen, like we have to figure out how to get him lunch, and he's living in your space. And so there's a shared kitchen that they're all using. And so how do you help him he now has access to some money because he's being paid. How do we get him access to groceries and a safe place to keep his groceries and a way for him to pack his lunch so that he can, you know, whether that's a fridge in his room or whatever else. And we have some money for wraparound funds so we can help. What do you have? And combining those things, and you know, making sure that those who can get a bus pass from someone else, we do that. If they don't, then we have a bus pass, and never duplicating services, and really kind of leveraging those things. And that's that unconditional support, that it doesn't matter. There's no problem that you can bring us that we're like, sorry, that's not a thing we deal with. You're going to have to go to this store. We're going to have to go to this store. That's not how we do things. It's no, okay, let's figure it out. Who are you already working with? Can they help you? Can we be a facilitator of that? And if not, then let us figure it out. But it's that's a really important part of our model for us is that kind of unconditional love piece. And honestly, I believe it's what leads to our success, because it's a feeling that so many people don't get in a lot of places, that there's often a no, and for good reason. Lots of our social service agencies do have capacity and legislation and all sorts of reasons why they have to say no to certain things. We aren't bound by any of those. We're our own company, and we create our own space, and we write our own rules. And I am a kind of a rule breaker, so I like that I don't have to follow any kind of bureaucratic rules that say I can or cannot do something. And so it kind of keeps us, you know, that ability to be really flexible. I in all of the work we do, whether it's for our clients or just in our community, I always like to say we never start at no. If there's a project or an idea on the table, we always start at maybe and see where it goes. And it might be no, but it's, you know, the answer is maybe until proven until proven no, you know, and hopefully it's a yes. So I think we take that same approach with our clients.
I think it's important to do a partnership and so forth. And we last week heard a really great presentation from Parkdale, and they are finding the same situation, that there's all this stock of housing, like you were referring to, that's in the community. And that's the same case in Prince Edward County. There's a stock of housing that the community or the county can't maintain. So they're thinking like, oh, we'll just sell them off. We'll get some money and then do something else with it. And there are properties around here that are doing that very much so. But Parkdale is a great model where they've been able to buy these homes from a lot of from the county that they don't want to maintain, upgrading them and putting them back into the stock. Because in Prince Edward County, they've added, I think, 19 homes, units in the past 10 years, 20, and lost 1,000. That's their statistic, not mine. That's the county statistic. And it's huge drop.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a huge drop. I heard a neat program today on CBC, and they're talking about vacant homes, that taxing the vacant homes in Kingston. That would be an interesting study to find out about. Anyway, I'll let somebody else get in a word.
I think, Maureen, did you have a question still, or was it answered?
I had a comment. This raising the roof thing, I think, is very interesting, because I imagine that you can't buy buildings or buy houses, or maybe you do, I don't know. But the notion, and this is the same thing that happened at our session last time with the YWCA and the Parkdale Community Land Trust, someone buys it. Then the next step is someone fixes it up to meet all the standards. And then the third step is a housing operator, a housing provider takes over the operations. So that's an interesting model. And we learned last week that the Toronto Community Housing, which does all the social housing there, had all these units, 81 units that were single houses. And the land trust bought them and renovated them. And now the YWCA, which is, you know, the biggest housing, one of the biggest in Toronto, is managing all 81 of them. So it's a very interesting model. And I know Raising the Roof from many years ago. And I think this is a big step forward. And I think there's an opportunity for whatever happens out of these sessions for us to actually have a conversation with Raising the Roof. Because in many cities and many towns and municipalities, they don't have money for housing, but they have land. And they can give land if someone can purchase it, renovate it, like we just heard from that previous speaker, and get it onto the market, and also keep it deeply affordable. You know, because affordable at 80% of market is not really deeply affordable for the kind of people that we're concerned about at Prince Edward Learning Center. So those are my comments. Thank you. I don't really have a question.
No, that's I mean, exactly the same model as Reside. Parkdale is doing the same thing, and we need more and more of those developers. And again, because I mean, the math on affordable housing does not work. Actually, you need the, you know, the reason it works for someone like Parkdale, or you know, I can speak more surely about the Reside model, is that when Sudbury Housing was selling off those homes, they sold those homes at a rate that made the math work. The cash value. I mean, I think this is public knowledge, but so they purchased it for a certain amount in cash. It was a small amount in cash, and the remainder to market value was held as a forgivable mortgage by the city of Sudbury, so that they could guarantee that it would stay affordable. So as long as Raising the Roof uses a social enterprise construction company, fixes it and keeps it deeply affordable, which is I mean, actually, I think the goal is that the city's agreement is affordable, but Raising the Roof's goal is to keep it deeply affordable. As long as they do that, I think for 25 years, then the mortgage is forgivable, and so it makes buying easier. The other thing that local communities or local governments do is they provide a grant that allows places like Parkdale or Raising the Roof or other developers to have cash on hand immediately to buy. So often, particularly in this market, you know, private developers can just go so quickly and buy up these properties where we're still raising money and still selling toques to try and raise it up. Okay, I want that property. I just have to sell 1,500 more toques before I can. And so this, you know, there's Raising the Roof is in their Change the Reside model, they created a space where they could move quickly to respond to you know, to be able to buy quickly. And that's a very important part of this model. And same thing with Parkdale is getting those properties into the hands of the groups that are going to keep them affordable and keep them as part of the stock. And getting your hands on land and property is a vital part of it for sure. And whether that's you guys do that locally and figure that out, or you partner with someone like Raising the Roof who has set a target of like 5,000 new units across Canada in like the next, I don't know, 5 years or something, like, or I'm not quite that short, but they've set themselves some lofty goals. So they are definitely open to, and maybe at the end, I'll go back and just play the Reside. There's a short bit, we are making, I think they made 6 of those small videos, and eventually there'll be a 5-minute documentary out of our Reside project here. Raising the Roof invested in that. And so I can play there's a short one on the Reside model. I'm happy to play that at the end. But Raising the Roof is ready for more communities to reach out, particularly those that are ready to also invest in a social enterprise. So, because that's a big part of their model. And I hope that Parkland, is that what it's called? Yeah, Parkland can see the value in social enterprise too. That would be ideal if they were using social enterprise too, would be the best, but there's not so many of us out there. So it's not always.
I just want to add one other thing. I don't think we can underestimate private developers moving quicker. When I was at YWCA, we lost a school that we had rented from the school board for over 15 years because the school board was putting them all to market. We couldn't get the capital as quick as a developer and we lost it. So that changed the whole way we operated in terms of trying to have a pool of money ready very quickly when something like that came up, because we lost, you know, I think 50 units that went into, because the developer could do it the next day, basically. Yeah. Anyway, I won't talk anymore.
I mean, I know I have a whole piece around public lands and that they should not be allowed to do that exact scenario, should not be allowed to happen with public lands. But that is like a rant for another day. But that's this whole piece around, you know, if we want to be serious as the nonprofit sector and utilize these business tools to create our own sustainability but solve social problems, we have to think like the business sector. We have to be ready like the business sector, and we have to hire the right people like the development people and get the money in place, and we have to employ those very cunning and business techniques that are necessary for us to be successful in doing this, because we are fighting against the private sector for sure.
And I see Richard Jones patiently has his virtual hand up, so I will let you go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, thank you. First, Carly, I just want to say, you must be part angel, because I was an advocate for a lot of years. Used to take the most difficult student always from the high school as they had to do student placement, and lots of them were ready to be booted out because they didn't fit into the system. And I always said to the school, like, just give me your most difficult. You know, I will do my best. I not necessarily will keep them, but if they respect me, I will give them the respect that they earn. And so, but they were always young children, right? And I think our young children today are well, what I've noticed anyway in the few years that I've been around, have changed a lot, and our society has changed a lot. And I think your I don't know how young the group, I kind of wanted to ask you how young you actually are taking people on, or are they all adults?
They're all ages. Yeah, there's no age limit. So usually somewhere between the ages of like 25 and 45, I would say. So
not so much the ones that high school students or anything like that that struggled out. Yeah, I just, so a little more mature. Yeah, because what I noticed is the last 2 students that I've taken, was interesting. Now, maybe just because I'm older and more difficult, but both of them basically dropped out of the program before they finished. Actually, one just had to bring a letter saying why he would do better in the future because he didn't show up for work about 50% of the time. And he was like, no, I'm not doing no letter. And so I was just like very interested because the first probably dozen that I ever had, I never lost one. But towards the end, it just became, they were less willing to compromise. They, you know, like you say, have their phone out or whatever, right? And distractions, there's more distractions, I guess, of today's society. But yeah, I'm really very happy I joined the session today because yeah, it makes me feel really good inside to know that we are creating more opportunity because we need to, for sure. And there's lots of work. It's just having somebody basically help to guide these people through their struggles, right? And get them back on the path. So that's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other, I'm just going to take a quick scan of the chat and hands. Before we come back to Ken, if you'd like to ask your next question.
You were talking about, I think it was Maureen, disposition of properties, and there is a program out there, and the county was wonderful in helping us that we wanted to buy the school that was closed, of which there's 1,000 in province of Ontario, just sitting there vacant. You can't buy it. Nobody, it doesn't matter how much money you offer, you can't buy it because it has to go to another Crown group called the disposition of property process. But the county partnered with us, or certainly I'm sure the Learning Centre can do the same thing because they are a service provider within the government framework. So you can buy it at market rent. So you have to have a market value. You have to have it appraised. The school board in this case had to have it appraised, or if it was a county, a Prince Edward County wanted to divulge a property, they have to, you get the appraisal and you buy it as another community service group provider can buy it. It's in that process for 1.5 years before anybody can go ahead and buy it. A private developer can't do it. And that's a kicker in Prince Edward County. No private developer is going to build affordable housing. They're just not. Why would they do that? You can sell a garage for $300,000. You can't build new affordable housing, really, because it costs you $400 a square foot. So you have it costs for 1,000 square foot little teeny weeny unit, it's costing you $400,000 plus to do that. Now the county has been great at helping the Love Song team by initially buying the property. We paid them back 100% plus carrying costs, and Shazam, we've got it. And they've also agreed to help us with planning. I see Michael's name is on here, Michael Michaud. He's one of the planning guys, and their team is helping us to change zoning and change the sever the property into multiple parcels, so you can use that then as your down payment. But we've been working with Loyalist College in Queens. The Loyalist College design and development and engineering and architectural teams have all come through and done some work for us. So that's certainly a way. And I agree with Richard. It's a challenge. I started my teaching career in inner city Detroit. Lots of knives and guns, lots of barbed wire around the school. But you know what? I don't care. Their background, if you treat them right. One of the toughest kids I ever taught was a difficult child in all the other classrooms, but I taught industrial arts, so he came into my classroom. He now works for the school board. It was one of their prized possessions, but he was a problem with it. Anyway, I'll let somebody else have a turn.
That's a great story, Ken. Any other questions? Again, looking for virtual hands or questions in the chat box for Carly. Okay. It looks like you've covered everything.
Perfect.
different
I
questions.
pulled up the other reside and the all 5 of those little shorts are currently on YouTube. So you're welcome. Oh, there is Veronica Green has her hand up there. Maybe we'll just
Sure. Yeah, Veronica, go ahead.
go to the video.
Sorry, yeah, sorry I was so late with my question. But I used to work for this organization in Toronto. Was really even before Habitat for Humanity started, and it was a Service Day Foundation type of organization where we went in and really refurbished facilities for Children's Aid and other, boys and girls clubs and that kind of thing. So my question is around that with your organization, with the community builders, do you only take on projects that are from start to finish, or do you take on projects that may be refurbishing type for other community organizations?
Yeah, I mean, any work, if it has value in terms of training, then absolutely we take it on. We just did some flooring for a nonprofit. That needed it done. It was just the flooring job, and we went in and did it. We do lots of renovations. We do lots of, I said it, we would get back to secondary suites, and I forgot to go around to it. We do a lot of secondary suites. We're doing one for a church, for instance. They have some space where they can put in a secondary suite. And just as you're talking about the cost of affordable housing, secondary suites are actually the cheapest way to put affordable housing units into a community. So into private basements or into nonprofits that have properties that can put a secondary suite in, including detached secondary dwellings. So I don't like the term tiny home, but a detached secondary residential dwelling, smaller space that is detached from a home that are allowed. They're allowed here in Sudbury, and part of Bill 23, which was the province's housing bill that hid all sorts of really crappy things in it, but also ensured that all municipalities had allowances or will have allowances for 3 units per property. And so as a community, adding affordable housing. And so those are types of things that you can do and that we would do. But yeah, I mean, any work that right now we're talking about a desk for the Y needs a new desk, and like there's learning in that too for our trainees. And so like I said, any project that comes to our table, it always starts with a maybe, and then we look at it and see, like, does it make sense for us? I also have the bottom line of profit to look at, right? And so if a custom private home comes to the table and I really have nothing else and I need work and I need money, there's a lot of money in that. And so maybe the answer is yes, it doesn't really fit with our mission, except that I can still train people in it. And if that homeowner connects with our work and wants to hire us and wants us to do that work, then okay, I'll do that work, right? So the answer, there's nothing off the table ever. And I think that openness is part of what makes this model successful.
So then the second part, because many of your people, when they're complete with the projects, if they want to go and expand, they can go towards their certification on whatever skill level they want to work on, whether they want to become a carpenter, whatever the trade is, I would imagine. But do you have any success stories as far as any of them getting work, or as a result outside of your organization?
Yeah, so we here in Sudbury, like I said, we're pretty new. So we started with the first 6 people I hired they weren't official trainees because we weren't up and running enough yet to call them a trainee, like in terms of the funding. But they were 6 guys that we hired that were general laborers, all of whom needed a lot of support, and we did all of the same things we do for trainees, and they learned on the job. A few of them are still with us, but many of them have moved on. 4 of them are employed and in good shape. Then we had our first cohort. We took on 4 people. 3 of those 4 are employed and in good shape. And now we have 6 in our program now. In Toronto, or rather in Barrie, they have had several cohorts and are up to 10 cohorts 10 people in a cohort at a time. And we have about a 95% rate of moving people into either employment or into additional education in the areas that they're interested in.
That's really great to hear.
The system does work. I can tell you in Manitoba, doing the same work, we had an individual who our program in Manitoba worked a little bit different in that we kept them, like our funding allowed us to keep them a little bit longer, and they moved through, and we actually we had an apprentice program. So we would keep them until level 2, sometimes level 3 apprentice, and then find them a position for level 4, just in carpentry. And we had one of our guys who started, he's like obviously our the poster for success for this work, but I still like to call on it as a story. But he started on like what we would call OW, but in Manitoba they call it EI. But starting on OW, he was very housing insecure, in recovery, and shaky recovery at best. Worked through our program, we held him to level 3 apprentice, because he was awesome, and our projects required us to have some really, really good people on our staff. And he went on and finished his level 4 and graduated very top in Manitoba. Top marks in his Red Seal apprentice the year that he graduated. And he came back a few years later and came to work for us. We needed a coverage for 2 weeks, and he agreed to come and do a cover the supervisor role for us for 2 weeks. And his wife dropped him off. They're driving their SUV. Their kids are in the back. They own their own home. They have this wonderful, beautiful life, and something he never would have expected. So that's the power of this piece. I am a very strong proponent of housing first. I do think that's the most important, and supportive housing is so important, but employment is so often the piece that we've allowed that to stay out of the nonprofit sector and not created supportive employment opportunities. And if you don't have supportive employment opportunities, that cycle of poverty is going to continue. And this is that version. And you can see that too in our interactions with service providers who are doing housing and doing supportive mental health and addictions work, and trying to get people moving. And that's the piece missing for them too, because they get people to a certain point. It's like, okay, what next? Now you need to be employed. Let's where do we go from there? And there's not a good space for them to land. And we show up and they're like, oh man, this is exactly what we need right now. And so it's for me, once, like I said, I showed up and I was like, I don't know anything about construction. And then all of a sudden I fell into this world that I've really fallen in love with, because it's sellable. It's sellable across across political lines. The NDPs, this is an easy sell. Liberals, it's an easy sell. Conservatives, this is an easy sell. You want people to get to work? I'll put them to work. You want me to be sustainable as a nonprofit? I'll be sustainable as a nonprofit. All of these things are true. And so it is sustainable. It's sellable across political parties and lines. That's what made me fall in love with the model, and because it works.
Thank you for sharing that.
Any other burning questions?
Okay, then I'll just share this last, I think 3 o'clock ends, we're already over, but I'll share this last little video just of Reside. And like I was saying, these are all on YouTube. Right now, I think there's the 5 shorts that we've done. But as soon as we are finished with these, we're just waiting for the move-in piece, which should happen at the end of the month. We'll have our first tenants moving into the homes. We've been the first 2 homes that we've done for Reside. That will be incorporated into kind of the mini doc, and that'll be available on YouTube. If you follow Raising the Roof on any social media platform, you will see it, I'm sure. But I'll share the one on the Reside program itself, and then you are welcome to YouTube, like Reside Sudbury, Raising the Roof, and you can find all 5 of them, and they are all really well done. It is a local filmmaker here in Sudbury who are doing it, and I'm pretty proud of them. And all my guys are in the video. So let me just share my screen again with sound. I think there's an ad on this one, sorry, but I'll just make this big. This is the ad, but then the thing will play. Oh, are you hearing anything? Maybe.
No sound yet.
We'll wait until maybe the real video starts to worry about it.
Yeah, sounds good.
No, I'm not getting sound, so something is just wrong.
It's a solution that I've watched it move people.
Okay. Good.
it's a solution that I've watched it move people out of poverty and into really dignified quality of life experiences.
It really changes your outlook if you could picture yourself and what you would want someone to do for you.
We have to do it together. And this is a step in the right direction.
Affordable housing is scarce in Canada. So the opportunity to have an affordable home is perhaps the difference between somebody's ability to provide for their family and is going to allow them to have success in their life.
There's thousands more out there in different communities all over the world, in this country, this province. So we'll do it one city at a time.
Ready to go?
So, okay, I don't want to start another video again. Oh, up next. That's what I wanted to stop at. I'm just going to get out of it. Oh, sure. Yes, nope, still going. There we go. So yeah, I encourage you to go and see the sorry, I can't find the screen you're all on. There you are. So I encourage you to go watch the rest of those videos. Like I said, there's 5 or 6 of them up already, including what was coming up on the what's next. It's a bit about 38 minutes. It was our opening ceremony, our opening ribbon cutting for the houses. We will be having a kind of an opening when we're finished early next month. So I'm happy to share that with you, and it'll be virtual just as our other opening was. So you're happy you can get a tour of the houses as they're finished. If you wanted to see them, I can make sure that link goes out to you. I do always, again, put a plug in for Raising the Roof, because if they can't, the more toques they sell and the more money they raise, then they can go into communities like yours and have money to purchase these homes and that kind of stuff, just as Parkland would. So I'll leave it at that with a little plug for them, because it is important, as we heard, to get those units and get that land. So please feel free to reach out. They have my info, my Carly@communitybuilders.co, easy to find. Please reach out if you have any other questions. And yeah, I was happy to be here today.
That's great. Thank you so much, Carly. I think I speak for everybody. I'm seeing lots of chats come in, lots of valuable information, and I see inspiration in the faces that are looking back at me through the screen. Maureen Adams, do you want to say anything on behalf of the board of the Prince Edward Learning Center, just in closing?
Thank you so much to many people, but I'm going to start with Carly. And passionate and inspiring was the words I was going to use. And also that you can start with an idea and a dream, and it can be small, and the impact can still be mighty and still grow, as your organization has done over time. So thank you very, very much. It was a pleasure to meet you and hear the journey that Community Builders has been on. I also wanted to thank Dominique, our facilitator. We did the Community Land Trust last week, and I forgot to thank her, and she held the whole thing together. So I'm thanking you twice for the last session and this one. And also Thrive, Katie, because the partnership between Prince Edward Learning Center and Thrive in the broader community is critically important. So thank you for being here. And then I want to thank some of the PELC people, Christine, who's taken a lead on this, along with Tammy, who is a staff person of PELC as well, and particularly to the executive director, who innovates and is entrepreneurial and builds a team that can do the kind of work all of the staff at PELC do. And then I wanted to note that 3 of our board members are well, actually 4, including me, are on this Zoom conversation today, and a couple of them or more were at the last one on Community Land Trust. And I guess the last thing I wanted to say is this is the second of 3 sessions. And I said it last time, and I'm going to say it again, how thrilled I am that leadership is developing in this area with our own organization, PELC. We went through a strategic planning process. I can't quite believe it when that we did it during lockdown or during the COVID, and we did it online, and I was not convinced that it could work, and it worked beautifully. But what came out of that was our strong recommitment to community development as a strong philosophical backbone to the organization, and also that has put advocacy, has continued to put advocacy as a pillar of our work in addition to the learning we do, and that we work with the people that come to our program, and they define the advocacy agenda that we should be focusing on. And they have identified the very issues that we are talking about today and last week: deeply affordable housing, the chance to have livable wages so they can contribute and be a member of the community like the rest of us. And next year, our next session will be about community benefit agreements, which will be something that's also emerging in many places in Ontario and across the country. So I'm so thrilled, and I said at the last session that people should stay connected. Every time we have a session, we learn so much, new information, new ideas that we will be thinking about as we go through this, about where we take it to the next step and who's interested in doing that. And we all have to start somewhere. We're not sure where that is yet and who would be interested in being around various tables, but we are very committed at the board level and the staff level at Prince Edward Learning Center to moving some of these things forward. So that's all I wanted to say. And thank you again to everybody who joined to learn and joined in the conversation. It was a great session. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks so much, Maureen. Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Carly, thank you again for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Having me.
Thank you, everyone. This was awesome. Looking forward to more conversation. Have a great day.